All right, guys, we're back. That's much better. There we go. So we are now watching a channel called Crux. Watch Crux. Make sure you are subscribed to Crux. Big shout out. This is live breaking news from Venezuela, from Caracas. Now what we are seeing here, sirens in Caracas, explosions lighting up the night sky. Two names at the center of the chaos, Nicolas Maduro and Donald Trump. And as reports of airstrikes are rocking Venezuela's capital, and we are going to move over to a little other footage right here.
Amor. Ay, no. Mira eso. Mira eso.
And we are going to continue to report on this. This is a breaking story, and you're seeing a lot of different footage here. Very scary footage from Caracas. And let's jump right over here for a report.
The Venezuelan capital. Remember, amid the tensions, the ongoing tensions between Venezuela and United States, these blasts are being reported from Venezuela. And India Today Global's Pranay Upadhyay is now joining us with more details on this. Pranay, Venezuelan capital rocked by multiple blasts, and it is being suspected that it is possibly the U.S.
And the Indian news is wide awake now.
And these blasts, given the ongoing tensions between the two countries, give us more details.
Anjali, the blasts which are being reported from the capital city of Venezuela, Caracas, are largely around the Fortuna military base of Venezuela, which is a prominent military base of Venezuela. And, around 7 blasts are being reported from that area. And the activity is still underway. This is what we are learning from our sources as well. And this is presumed to be a military action carried out by the United States because there are, the sounds heard of low-flying helicopters and some of the aircraft.
News, come
However,
in,
there is
come in.
no confirmation from the United States government, Pentagon, or the U.S. Southern Command. But we have seen that since September 2025 onward, there have been rising tension between Venezuela and the United States. And we have seen that, recently, U.S. has also carried out a drone action on land of Venezuela, besides the, ambush and besides the targeting of the narcotic vessels or the vessels which are believed to be carrying the illicit drugs and narcotics. So definitely a heightened tension in the region.
All American air traffic has been banned because of military activity. No incoming or outgoing flights. All air traffic, private and public,
Caribbean, and
Commercial.
because of the U.S. action and the U.S.
Come
military
in, come in.
presence. And if you see the social media feed of the U.S. Southern Command or U.S. The naval fleet of Gerald R. Ford, the U.S. Aircraft carrier, there is heightened activity as far as these military presence of the United States is concerned. But there is no official word either from the Venezuelan government as yet, or the U.S. government, as far as these actions in the capital city of Caracas are concerned.
But Pranay, it is important to note the timing given the tensions between US and Venezuela, and also these blasts come after Donald Trump warned of possible ground strikes.
Obviously, Anjali, that's why it is being presumed that possibly the U.S. might be carrying out some action in that region. Because recently U.S. has also warned Venezuela, and even President Donald Trump indicated of a possible regime change as well, because this is the maximum pressure policy of President Donald Trump against Venezuela. However, President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela has recently given out some reconciliatory messages. He said that he's open to talks with the United States. He is willing to engage with the United States to curb the illicit drug trafficking from Venezuela and whatever the concern of the United States as far as the drugs are concerned. So Venezuela has expressed its willingness to engage with the United States. But if you see, there is no change as far as the U.S. military presence in the region is concerned. And we have seen that how U.S. Marines have been placed, how U.S. Aircraft carrier and guided missile destroyers have been placed in the Caribbean region.
Right, Pranay, is there any reaction from the United States side on these blasts in Venezuelan capital?
Not yet. We are waiting that of a formal reaction from either Pentagon or the U.S. Southern Command. But what we can make out of the recent social media post posted by the U.S. Southern Command, which is actually overviewing the operation in the Caribbean region, clearly shows that the presence and the military exercises and as well as
hit that like button, subscribe and share.
Carried out by the U.S. Southern Command.
Breaking
and
news
the fleet under its
Venezuela.
operation. There are some activities being carried out there. You can
you for
see
the
in the
20
visuals as well. There are the helicopter
subscriptions,
activities
the 20 gifted
and
memberships.
the series of explosions. So such kind of action can
86
only be carried out
coming in
by
hot with 20 gifted
a
subs. Thank you very
planned
much,
military
sir.
operation. There's some multiple blasts. However, there could be a possibility of a sabotage as well. That is also not being ruled out because we are waiting for a formal reaction from the Venezuelan government as well. Because so far, no government, neither United States or Venezuela, has given out any statement. But as I mentioned, a Venezuelan base of Fortuna in the capital city of Caracas seemed to be the prime target because all 6 and 7 explosions have been heard around the Fortuna military base of Venezuela.
All right, Pranay, thank you so much for all those details. We'll keep coming back to you for more updates on the story. So, late night blast being reported in Venezuelan capital Caracas, and it is being suspected that it could be the capital rocked by blasts. Late night blast being reported. Fears of U.S. airstrikes on Venezuela. Reports claim U.S. raids at 2 a.m. So explosions, loud noises and columns of smoke were being heard and seen in Venezuelan capital Caracas in the early hours of Saturday, that is January 3rd. According to witnesses, and the southern area of the city near a major military base was without electricity. Now, as you can see in these visuals that has been obtained by Reuters, which shows multiple blasts lighting up the night sky.
And we are going to continue and move over to some NBC. This is live coverage over the phone, 4:15 a.m. So we're just a couple minutes behind it.
The war on drugs. Now, if you're talking about direct military strikes on on military strikes directly on military targets that sustain the regime, that goes beyond just a war against drug traffickers, a war against small boats carrying relatively small amounts of narcotics, allegedly. So this is a message that the regime will not be able to ignore any longer.
Richard, let's stay on that point that you're making there about a message. We spoke earlier with Will Freeman, the fellow for Latin American Studies at Council on Foreign Relations, at the Council on Foreign Relations. And one thing he mentioned was, of course, we can't speculate what that next step might be by the Trump administration, but he did say that any success here would have to come with
we are live
boots
in
on the
Los
ground.
Angeles.
Are you hearing from any of your sources about any not potential that would be any sort of impending next step, but just the possibility of that even being a consideration by the administration at some point?
Consideration, everything is undoubtedly under consideration, and the Pentagon plans for every scenario in every conflict. So I'm sure they do have a plan for boots on the ground, but no one that I've talked to.
From Richard Engel. He is a veteran wartime correspondent
who has considered that as or suggested to me that is a real possibility. The absolute preference would be economic pressure, and Venezuela is already under tremendous economic pressure from the United States. But as we've seen in other parts of the world with Russia and Ukraine, economic sanctions only go so far. We've seen it with Iran. Iran is one of the most sanctioned countries in the world, yet it continues to find allies in other parts of the world, and China and Russia, other parts of the so-called global South, help sustain it. Same thing with North Korea. North Korea is sanctioned, but it finds ways with Russia and China and other allies to keep its economy moving. So the next pressure campaign is or has been military strikes. Boats on land, potentially now in Caracas. Boots on the ground, American troops occupying a territory is a entirely different kind of conflict. That would be Americans there trying to bring in and sustain a new government, and no one has suggested to me that is under active consideration. Although, as I mentioned, anytime you're involved in military planning, you have options from A to Z, but I've never heard that considered as a realistic option.
Yeah, Richard, thank you for that. If what we are seeing tonight regarding this potential escalation, even though it has not yet been confirmed by the White House or the Pentagon yet, these strikes or explosions, if this is being considered a massive escalation, certainly any other scenario beyond that would be inconceivable at this point. We wouldn't want to speculate for that. Richard Engel, we appreciate your reporting, chief foreign correspondent for us, and we'll have you stand by to continue to give us Okay, now we're going to bring in Ana Vanessa Herrera. She is a journalist based in Caracas. We want to hear from her now on her experience, what she's hearing, what she's seeing. Ana, do I have you?
Yes, I'm here. How are you?
Ana, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. First of all, how are you, and are you safe?
So far, yes, we are safe. We're in the eastern side of Caracas, and apparently all the strikes or alleged strikes are happening in the part of the eastern side, but also in the center of Caracas.
Okay, tell me what you're learning so far, whether it's from people you know or what you've experienced directly.
Yes, well, it all started, I'm going to start with what I experienced, what I witnessed. It started around 2 a.m. Local time. I heard a very, very large bang, an explosion, and all the windows started vibrating, all the windows shaking, not only on my apartment, but the rest of the area as well. And immediately after that, I witnessed a large a tower of smoke coming from what looked like the center of Caracas, and then, bright lights and other explosions. What I was hearing most was the sound of what I believe were aircrafts or helicopters flying above the capital city. And immediately when I started witnessing that, I received reports from other colleagues, family members, friends, known ones that were seeing and hearing exactly the same in different parts of Caracas. Also, just minutes later, maybe half an hour later, we started seeing reports of exactly the same thing, but on the coastal area of Venezuela, in La Guaira, specifically in the port of La Guaira, which is the main port of Venezuela, where all ships and cargo arrives. And there are videos that are not confirmed yet, because
news,
we have no
come in, hit
confirmations
the like
of
button.
specifically each video that we're looking at that was being shared on WhatsApp, on Twitter, on social media. We have no confirmation of that, but there's specific video that is shown in La Guaira. I can recognize the streets of La Guaira. I don't know when that was recorded, at what time, but you can see the devastation of the port of La Guaira, what was left after that bombing. And also something very that is common between all of the reportings and my own experience is that people are very, very scared and nervous about not only what's happening, but what is going to happen next.
Do you have family in that area? Have you been able to speak to them if you do, and are they safe?
They're all safe, and my family, my friends, they're all safe in around the area. I worry for the people that are near the military bases that were allegedly attacked, and I repeat allegedly because we don't have specific confirmation of any casualties or material devastation from any authority, not only government authorities, but also from local authorities. We have no confirmation from the firemen or police in any of the municipalities that were hit by
86 GOP, another 20 gifted memberships. Thank you.
whatever is happening right now.
And
Welcome,
I know
everybody.
we have
Come
heard
in,
of
come
reports
in.
of loss of power. Have you seen that from your own experience?
Yes, I witnessed from where I'm standing. You can see behind me there's like a small mountain, and on the other side at my right there is I'm sorry, I'm just getting a lot of reports right now, so there's a lot of information that's coming. So I just need to be very clear that there is no confirmation on what is happening and what happened after the detonations from any authority so far. So I was telling you at my right, I have a clear view of part of a working class neighborhood of Petare and part of the center of Caracas. And both areas are still without any electricity. There were reports of electricity failures and blackouts, not only in La Guaira, which is the port of Venezuela, but also in the places nearby military bases, La Carlota and the Defense Ministry in the center of Caracas.
There we go. Fire trucks in.
Okay, so you can see that directly, some of the neighborhoods behind you, and I know that you haven't been able to. Have you been able to speak to anyone on the ground in those neighborhoods besides your family?
No, there's no. The communications are really complicating the situation right now. So what we know, what we first learned was through not only
Caracas,
social media,
Venezuela,
but through WhatsApps and videos and pictures shared on WhatsApp, but without any kind of context. Because of course, this is our regular citizens. We're just. We don't understand, and they don't understand what they're looking at, and they're just filming and sharing the information. So that is why we have so much footage, but we have no specific context. We don't know when, who recorded it, where exactly, what was happening, what happened before and after they stopped recording. So it has been difficult for me specifically to talk to anyone around military areas and around those neighborhoods. But I do know that people in La Guaira reported that they heard explosions and they saw the explosions. And then this video was, as I was telling you, showed allegedly what would be the devastation of the port of La Guaira.
Allegedly.
When was that the last round of explosions that you heard? I know that we are hearing reports that the first round was heard just before 2 a.m. Local time in Caracas.
Yes, exactly right, as you said.
Over 500
around
people
2
in the
a.m.,
building. Thank you
I
so
heard
much.
the first
Everybody hit that like
explosions,
button.
and
This
people.
is some very important breaking news, so hit that like button so more people can see it. Thank you very much.
Share the same experience as me. And then the last ones I heard was about maybe 40 minutes ago. But again, I am in the eastern side of the capital of Caracas. Now, in the center of Caracas, there are reports of people still hearing not only the other bangs, other explosions, or what they believe are explosions, but also the sound of planes. I heard that up until like 20 minutes ago. I was hearing planes flying over, or what I believe were planes, because that was the loud sound, flying over where I am, and going straight to
another
to
20 gifted memberships from 86 GOP. Thank you so much.
People are reporting exactly the same, but I haven't experienced any
Caracas,
new detonation, any new
what appeared to be American airstrikes on Venezuela's sprawling capital
so far, and but it doesn't mean, of course, that this is not happening any other way, any other place. I'm sorry.
Certainly, of course, this is all based on your specific vantage point from the eastern part of the region.
Welcome new members.
Anna, when it comes to any sort of emergency services, you said you have not heard from local fire, from local police. Have you heard from anyone in your building, any leadership asking for evacuations, anyone leaving, anything like that?
No, not around here. We do have reports of that happening, evacuations happening in Fuerte Tiuna, where the defense ministry is, and people were apparently leaving the area. But this is very interesting because we need to right now understand the context of the situation. So no one really understands what is happening right now. We don't know if this, although the government, the Venezuelan government, Nicolas Maduro representation addressed this and said that Venezuela was being attacked, and there was a military attack on Venezuela. But we don't really understand what is going on right now. And Venezuela has been a country without any wars for the longest, for 200 years. So I don't know if people are really ready for what is happening. I don't know if really people understand that they need to evacuate, or they need to run.
Looks like they have another feed running
or
through
that they
here.
need to look for shelter if they are around this. What I know is that we're looking at a lot of footage that is being recorded very close by where the situation is happening.
They fixed that quick.
Anna, you bring up a great point, that is, if the population was not ready or braced for something like this, this could get very scary, very frightening, very dangerous very quickly for people in and around Caracas. And our NBC News reporter Gabe Gutierrez had mentioned to us earlier that his sources were telling him that they were hearing of these strikes being at the main operational headquarters of Venezuelan armed forces, which had residents there, and also possible strikes on military bases, including the telecommunications towers, which would make it nearly impossible for people to communicate, get across.
We recently saw just a bunch of aircraft and a bunch of helos coming in low.
Information to one another. Like you were saying, you have been thankfully able to communicate via WhatsApp and other cell phone applications.
We're going to jump over to see what the coverage is over here.
Starting at around 2 a.m. local time. You can see the video here coming in. It shows low-flying aircraft in the city. This is the first U.S. military attack within the country. President Trump is targeting the South American nation over its authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his alleged ties to drug cartels. It follows months of military buildup in the region. The strikes come just hours after Maduro had said he was open to negotiations with the U.S. Let's go right to CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand. She's traveling with the president in West Palm Beach, Florida. And Natalie, what are we hearing from the Trump administration right now?
Well, as of this hour, sources are telling CBS News that Trump administration officials are aware of these reports of explosions and aircraft. No immediate response from the White House, but we've also learned, per U.S. officials, that President Trump ordered strikes on sites inside Venezuela.
Another 10 gifted memberships from 86 GOP. Thank you so much.
The administration has escalated its campaign against the regime of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, which the U.S. administration views as illegitimate. So right now, as you've seen on some initial video coming in, which we are still working to gather and confirm, several explosions were heard around 2 a.m. local time Saturday overnight in Venezuela's capital city, Caracas. People seen kind of rushing to the streets. And again, this is something that the president himself had said was a possibility out loud, talking about potential land strikes. CBS News has also learned from sources that the president gave the U.S.
The capital Caracas in the northern part of Venezuela. That's Curacao right over there.
Military the green light to conduct land strikes in Venezuela days before the actual operation, waiting for conditions to be right there. Sources also say that military officials were even going to conduct the mission on Christmas, but U.S. airstrikes in Nigeria, as you may remember, against ISIS.
Well, we'll get to all that, Alfredo.
Precedence that day, according to the sources. So again, we are still working to confirm the latest, but Clarissa, as you know, this comes on top of months of a pressure campaign, which started back in September with those initial strikes that we saw on alleged drug boats off the coast of Venezuela. That has expanded now to a massive military buildup around Venezuela, a blockade of sanctioned oil tankers, a pressure campaign that's both military and also economic pressure.
As you said, this has been a slow and steady escalation. What is the president's goal in Venezuela at this time?
You know, he's been careful not to completely disclose that when asked directly by reporters. He won't talk about regime change, even though that's what a lot of lawmakers over on Capitol Hill say that
reported American airstrikes in Caracas, Venezuela. Trump versus Maduro.
Signs point to. But President Trump, in interviews with reporters, including CBS News' own Norah O'Donnell, has said that he believes that Maduro's days as president are numbered. The big question, of course, is what would happen next. And that's where even allies of the president on Capitol Hill, after they received briefings on Venezuela operations, they said that they had more questions for administration officials about the real strategy here and the end game.
Natalie Brand, thank you for those details on what's happening in Venezuela right now. Now, CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano is talking to sources in both Colombia and Venezuela. And Lilia, what is the reaction in these overnight hours to all of this?
Well, over the last few minutes,
coverage about Venezuela airstrikes happening as we speak.
An hour since I started seeing these reports, I started reaching out to sources in Venezuela. I heard from folks who confirmed that they heard one person who heard the loud bangs, who said that their area, which is near one of these bases that was bombed, could hear the loud bang, that the skies were orange and that they lost power quite immediately. There were people, of course, were expecting that something could happen, but they have been waiting for many weeks. So, of course, now when it does happen, they are
hit that
high
like button,
alert.
subscribe and
I
share.
have also
Red
heard
Tigers
I
coming in
reached out
10
from when I covered the
gifted
election
memberships
last
to
week
Zero Dark
to
Tony. So
people
thank you
who
so much.
are
Thank you, Brad.
supportive or allied to the Maduro regime, and they said that they are standing guard, that they're waiting for more information, but that they're willing to come out and fight whatever that means to maintain the Venezuelan, they say government, of course, regime. I also reached out to Colombia. The president of Colombia has issued a couple of tweets. In them, he makes sure to state that Colombia is neither an enemy of Venezuela or of the United States, and is placing Colombia in a way in between both countries and offering the possibility of entering or allowing or facilitating negotiations. And Maduro has now, or the government of Venezuela, has also issued a statement in the last several minutes calling this a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations. I am hoping to hear a little bit more about more reactions from Venezuela, but of course this happened at 2 a.m. local time, and people are sharing what they can on social media. It seems like the strikes are primarily airports, military bases. And we're hoping to hear
a lot of resources, not just oil there.
From our government, and reached out to military sources too for confirmation, but we'll continue making calls.
Sure, and it's probably too early to tell if there's been any casualties in all of this as well. Lilia Luciano, thank you so much for that information. Well, to recap, the U.S. attacked military facilities in Caracas, Venezuela's capital. Multiple explosions were heard around 2 a.m. local time, marking America's first military attack inside Venezuela. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and on CBS Saturday morning.
All right, so what we're looking at now is some more live coverage out of Caracas, Venezuela.
And power backups. And I mean, you know, we've been ready for this since the conflict started. When it started, I immediately identified that this was absolutely different from any kind of conflict and military conflict than before. Venezuela has experienced a lot of pressure from not only this second administration, but the first administration, Donald Trump's first administration. They also applied a full pressure policy against Venezuela, but this was absolutely different from the start. When the ships started blocking Venezuela, I immediately thought that this was going to be different. So my connection right now works, but I understand that the first thing that is going to collapse is going to be not only the communications, but electricity and water supply. Not only because of something of the strike or whatever we can call this next step. We still don't know how to call it, but because those are the main issues that Venezuelans have had for the longest time. Electricity, communications, internet connection has been very poor for years now. So, of course, if something like this happened, we could expect, all communications coming, not only being blocked, but collapsing.
Yeah. Now let's take just a quick look at some of the natural resources in Venezuela. These are very important. Not only the world's largest proven oil reserves, along with significant deposits of natural gas, iron ore, bauxite, gold. You have coltan and thorium. So bauxite is aluminum oxides and silicas. You have coltan. It's this is a point of contention because there are some child labor ethical issues involved, but this is used for electronics. The coltan is used for your electronics, your mobile phones, things like that, even automotive parts. Okay. And when you talk about thorium, okay, thorium is a potential nuclear fuel because it can be turned into uranium, right? Which is a major part of that process.
And Anna, you mentioned taking
cell phones, nuclear fuel, aluminum, right? These are a lot of the other resources, not just the largest fuel deposits in the world. So many more things.
all of this into context of the history of the region and the government. And I just want to remind anyone watching at home that the government of Venezuela has responded. So I want to reread that one more time. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela rejects, condemns, and denounces before the international community the extremely serious military aggression perpetrated by the current government of the United States of America against Venezuelan territory and population in the civilian and military areas of the city of
resources are possible uranium and nuclear fuel sources and things for cell phones and car parts, right? Aluminum.
Caracas, the capital of the republic, and the states of Miranda, Aragua, and La Guaira. This act constitutes a flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter, especially Articles 1 and 2, which enshrine respect for sovereignty, the legal equality of the states, and the prohibition of the use of force.
We'll take them.
Such aggression threatens the international peace and stability, specifically in Latin America and the Caribbean and the places the lives of millions of people at grave risk. And I apologize. I think we lost our reporter there on the ground, Ana Vanessa Herrero. Okay, Ana, we have you. We have you back.
Off a hot one.
We're going to go back out to Ana here as soon as we can. Want to let everybody know at this hour. Ana, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just kind of re-examining this statement that was put out just within the last hour by the government of Venezuela. What's your reaction?
I'm sorry, I think I lost that last part. Can you?
Yes, just hearing from the reaction from the government of Venezuela within the last hour. Of course, we haven't received confirmation.
The capital city of Caracas.
From the White House or for the Pentagon regarding these strikes or these explosions, but the government of Venezuela is pointing the finger toward the United States, strongly condemning these explosions. What's your reaction?
Well, it's only natural that they understand that they would point to the United States, because this would mean that the next phase that Donald Trump was announcing just a month ago is already happening. Of course, as you said, we need confirmation from the White House and from Donald Trump and the administration to absolutely confirm that this is the situation. But I think that the government of Nicolas Maduro would know if this was something orchestrated from inside or an attack coming from the United States. So the amount of videos that are running around social media, it's just overwhelming. And so we don't really know which one it was recorded when, but every video shows the same thing over and over: loud explosions, a lot of planes, or what we believe are planes flying above the coastal area and the capital city of Caracas. And the Venezuelan government just issuing the statement, for me, is absolute confirmation that they know that this is coming from a source different from an internal break. And I think that was the confirmation they were waiting for. They took a while to confirm, and we haven't seen them or heard from them. We just read the statement. And there are, I repeat, reports of a lot of things happening, allegedly. We have no confirmation where Nicolas Maduro is right now. We don't know. We haven't seen him. We haven't heard from him. But we wouldn't wait for that to be the case, so that we'll definitely confirm what happened. I'm sure that something happened and they can talk about it, they will give all the details. But I think that this confirms that the escalation of the conflict came to a point that Venezuela was not really expecting. Just days before, we saw Nicolas Maduro dancing, celebrating not only New Year's, Christmas, and before that, celebrating and saying that this was only a psychological war, but this was not a serious threat. But just a day ago, after what Trump announced was the first strike that allegedly happened in El Zulia, in the area, the Zulia area, the region close to Colombia, and that President Petro, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, later confirmed. He changed the narrative, and he said that he was ready to seriously speak and talk to Donald Trump and to welcome new investments, U.S. investments. If they wanted the oil, then he could negotiate that as well with new investments. So he changed the narrative, but he kept dancing and celebrating. So I don't really believe that they saw this coming, because I'm sure that that wouldn't be the speech if they knew that this was going to happen.
Ana Vanessa Herrero reporting for us directly from Caracas. Ana, I appreciate your reporting, and please stay safe there. If you can, stand by for us. We will have more questions for you coming up, no doubt. But first, I would like to go back to NBC News senior producer Geraldine Coles-Azokar, who we spoke with earlier, whose family is there in Caracas. Geraldine, you've got some new information for us. What can you tell us?
Yeah, hi, Corey. Just to recap what we talked earlier, I talked to my brother who lives in the same neighborhood as Fortuna. They experienced, the first bombardment, smelled the smoke. There were several sort of like explosions, and they knew that it was inside of the military base, or that's what they say. And then I also, a little while ago, spoke to my other two brothers who live in a different neighborhood in the east of Caracas, and they experienced other explosions also, and they live near La Carlota, which is one of the airports in Caracas. And so they said that they felt that that was kind of like the target for that one, for those explosions. And also every time one of those bombs sort of fell, they felt it. They heard it, they felt it, and one of my brothers described it as it's kind of like a thunder that never ends. And that's sort of what they were experiencing a little bit.
It's hard for me to even contemplate that. That's a very visceral thing to experience. We've also been seeing a lot of these videos, and as our reporter Ana Vanessa Herrero had mentioned, we haven't been able to verify these videos that we're seeing, but these videos across the board have been showing. This explosion that you're watching right now on your screen, it is absolutely striking to see. Wow. And we've seen these same explosions across many different videos that have been posted online.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome.
Still waiting to verify what exactly we're looking at, where these strikes or explosions came from. But you also see in some of these video some sort of whether it's a helicopter or aircraft flying overhead. We do not know what that aircraft is. And across the board, we've seen and heard more from people that seem to be fleeing the streets, especially near where the explosion happened. But even if they're further outside of Caracas, have your family seen evacuations yet, Geraldine?
No, they've actually sort of experienced the opposite in the 3 locations where my relatives live. They said that it's sort of like dead silence, like nobody's out in the streets. Everybody's sort of like staying inside of their homes. So, I'm not quite sure how whatever orders Maduro has given sort of affect that, of people being around and walking around. But yeah, they haven't seen, there's no cars, no military movement or anything in Caracas. They haven't seen anything. And this is sort of like in the east and again in the center of Caracas.
And they haven't heard from any emergency services yet either, whether it's from the local fire department or police there.
No, not at all. The only thing they're sort of reporting is like near the center where my brother, who lives near Fortuna, is experiencing. Obviously, they're experiencing the blackout, so communications are a little bit more dicey. And other parts of Caracas, as you can see on the screen, are lit up, and other ones are sort of like in the dark.
You know, Ana Vanessa Herrero had mentioned earlier as well that one challenge for local residents is going to be, besides the electricity, is going to be some basic needs in the coming days, such as water. Have your family reported any concerns for their survival in the coming days?
Well, I think there was, you know, in the days leading to this, there was a lot of speculation about whether there was actually going to be an action on Venezuelan soil or not. And so I think a lot of families, like including mine, have sort of been, you know, slowly sort of gathering supplies in case something did happen. Venezuelans have experience with that, right? Just because of all of the different protests and the different times where I think the Venezuelan people have risen and gone out in protest, and sort of at times it has paralyzed operations in Caracas, so people are very familiar with going and being like sort of stockpiling, if you will, a little bit whatever they can find and whatever they can afford, to be very honest. So yeah, they sort of been preparing a little bit for this, you know, without knowing that this was actually going to happen.
You know, earlier we were speaking to Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel for NBC News, who said his sources didn't say exactly, but they were alluding to...
And we're going to jump forward a little bit here.
Even Chief of Staff Susie Wiles in a recent interview acknowledged that one of the main purposes of these alleged drug boat strikes was to, quote, make Maduro cry uncle. And so given that backdrop, given that context, the world was watching to see what would be the next step in this military buildup. Already more than 100 people have been killed as part of those alleged drug boat strikes in the Eastern Caribbean, and the Eastern Pacific. And now we are awaiting word from the White House or the Pentagon, any confirmation on exactly what is transpiring
Hit the like button, guys. Subscribe and share. Breaking news. Come in. Come in.
We have is that government
Thank you for joining us.
From Venezuela accusing the U.S. of being behind the explosions that you're seeing there on your screen. But we have no confirmation of any injuries, no confirmation of the whereabouts of Nicolás Maduro, no indication what his government will do next, and no indication on what the president's President Trump's reaction might be to what's transpired overnight. Corey.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, Gabe, how the fact that as the moments continue to pass, as we are reporting on this breaking news, the silence from the White House and the Pentagon gets louder and louder. No doubt they are keeping abreast of any updates. So we continue to wait to hear from our government. Let's go now to our Chief Foreign Correspondent, Richard Engel. Richard, what's the latest?
And back to Richard Engel. Oh, Richard.
We're going to bring in Richard as soon as we get his signal up here in just a moment. But I want to...
I'm here, yes.
Oh, here we go. Hi, Richard. Take it away.
Sorry, I don't think you were hearing me. Yes, this is extraordinary details that are coming in. The report you had, the witness report in Caracas, as she was describing what she thought were low-flying aircraft or helicopters, explosions in multiple parts of the country. This can only be a coordinated strike. But the main question that I have at this moment is this just the beginning? Is this a message to Maduro and his inner circle, because apparently they had not been getting the message that the Trump administration was trying to deliver, or is this the start of a continuing campaign? And I think that will only become clear not by the statements from U.S. officials. Well, that will be an indication, but by what happens tonight, tomorrow. Will there be a follow-on military campaign? Because multiple coordinations, the sounds of helicopters and aircraft flying low, explosions are at and around military sites. that's a coordinated military strike. That is a regime change operation level, not counter-narcotics operation. We're still awaiting official confirmation, but if you look at all of the indications here, there are very few countries that have the ability to do this, that have the will to do this. This is an escalation, and the question I have at this moment is, will there be more strikes tonight, or was this I don't want to say one-off, because there's already been strikes on boats and there's already been a land strike in a remote part of the country, but was this just one more escalatory step to try and convince the Maduro regime to leave power, or is this the start of a sustained military campaign to drive them from power?
Now, Richard, I have a question for you in response to your question, because I agree. I think that's what we're all wondering at this hour. My question to you is...
Let me answer that question. This is from the New York Times 3 minutes ago. Live updates. U.S. captures Venezuelan leader. Trump says. President Trump announced that U.S. forces had carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and were flying President Nicolas Maduro and his wife out of the country. So, according to the New York Times, President Maduro has been captured. This is breaking news. Thank you so much, 86 GOP, $50 super chat. You nailed this one, baby. Thank you so much. So there it is, live from the New York Times, breaking news out of Caracas, Venezuela, updated 3 minutes ago. U.S. captures Venezuelan leader, Trump says.
Because we have not heard from the White House or the Pentagon, is that in itself a response?
No, it's I don't want to say a holiday period in the middle of the night, but it is also a holiday period in the middle of the night, and I think they're trying to calibrate their response. And there are also countries mediating. I know several officials who are directly involved in this process. This is not happening in a vacuum. When there have been strikes carried out against the boats, there have also been negotiations. People have been, U.S. officials, through intermediaries, have been talking to the Maduro regime and made it clear that they want the Maduro regime, specifically President Maduro himself and his inner circle, to leave the country, to no longer be in power. And they believe, the Trump administration believes, and others believe, that the Maduro regime is not only illegitimate, that it is backed by Cuban intelligence, that it is tied to the drug trade. They have been designated narco-terrorists, and they want them out. So, going back to why we haven't heard a statement yet, it's also very likely that in addition to the public statements, there are back channel conversations.
For the super chat, Trump just posted Maduro was caught
going on with intermediaries, with officials in the regime to calibrate their reaction. Did they get this message? Do there need to be more strikes? Is there a period of negotiations now? Maduro has said that he is open to talks, but he has also made it clear he has no intention at this stage of stepping down and leaving power. We will see if that calculation has now changed, or if those more significantly around him have changed their calculations, because dictators only last as long as they have control of primarily the military. If they lose control of the military and the security services, they generally lose control of the country as well. So I think we're going to we will hear something quite soon, but I have no doubt they're trying to calibrate what message they're trying to send, and they're probably trying to get some initial assessments of what the response was, how the government itself is receiving this attack.
And of course,
now we are starting to see these headlines start to come out around the world. Trump, Maduro captured in large-scale strike on Venezuela. There you see it right there, another headline. Maduro captured in large-scale strike on Venezuela along with his wife.
Now getting a little bit of a trickle in of governments responding. Wow. The Cuban government also strongly denouncing these alleged strikes, as reported by Gabe Gutierrez. Richard, when it comes to the talk that happened back and forth, maybe not directly, but indirectly between Nicolas Maduro and President Trump in the days leading up to this. On New Year's Day, for example, Nicolas Maduro saying that he was willing to negotiate to some degree, and then the United States saying that they felt that it wouldn't make much of a difference. This feels a little bit to me like a preamble leading up to the fact that these strikes may have been planned and we're going to have moved forward no matter what.
Well, let's not forget how many American troops and how much military force has been moved to Latin America recently. We've all noticed the strikes on the boats. That's been the most obvious part of this campaign. And Gabe mentioned a short while ago that around 100 people have been killed in these strikes on small boats allegedly carrying narcotics destined for the United States. But strikes, lethal strikes on small boats, you don't need American aircraft carriers. You don't need the thousands of troops that are stationed in the region now for several months. That level of power is only needed to, again, send a message to the military that the U.S. is serious and has the possibility for regime change, or to carry out strikes like the ones that we saw just a few hours ago. So there is a military
Richard,
presence.
thank you so much.
Imagine.
I'm going to pause you here because I want to alert all of our stations to be on standby at this moment because we are going to be heading to an NBC News special report. I want to alert our stations to be on standby at this moment. We're now going to an NBC News special report.
Here we go.
This is an NBC News special report.
The Peacock.
Good day to you. I'm Peter Alexander with this NBC News special report. We are coming on the air right now with breaking news out of Venezuela, where several explosions have rocked the capital city there of Caracas. That is according to multiple eyewitnesses that NBC News has spoken to over the last several hours. Those eyewitnesses sharing firsthand accounts of those explosions. The Venezuelan government, for its part, has accused the United States in a new statement from overnight of carrying out the military attacks, condemning the strikes as what it calls extremely serious military aggression. Neither the White House nor the Pentagon has issued any comment. New interview that he was open to negotiating with Washington to combat drug trafficking, the first sign that this pressure campaign was taking its toll. The questions that it raises now are, was there any resistance by Maduro when this took place? Was this in some way negotiated with those around him? Those are questions we have on the ground. As you say, the U.S. swept in and did this under the veil of darkness. It took place very quickly. We don't know what may have occurred on the ground right now, but it raises a lot of real questions.
Maduro and his wife have been captured and flown out of the country, according to President Trump.
About what, if any, conversations did exist in any form with Nicolas Maduro, or if this was the first contact when, in effect, the United States military was knocking on his door and sweeping up him and his wife and taking them out of the country.
Panama too. Noriega, people, those who remember the story, he was accused of being a narco trafficker, refused to leave. U.S. forces swept in and grabbed him. To answer some of the questions, I know for the last several months there have been contacts through intermediaries with Maduro's inner circle to try to convince him to leave the country. He was not interested. He was resisting. This pressure campaign has been escalating. First with the boats, then with President Trump declaring him a narco-terrorist, then all of the U.S. military buildup in the region, the aircraft carrier strike groups, the submarines, the drones, aircraft. Then, shortly before New Year's, a land strike allegedly carried out by the CIA. Very few details about what was hit then. And now, overnight, a capture operation. You don't do a capture operation without attacking some military site.
Make sure you hit that like button, guys. It absolutely helps out the channel, and I really do appreciate it. So hit that thumbs up.
Because you need to clear the airspace, you need to clear away air defenses, you need to protect the helicopters and the troops that are going in to...
Foreign correspondent for NBC. on the phone.
Move the person you're trying to arrest. So the U.S., President Trump, just decided to pull a Panama 2 for New Year's and effect regime change in Venezuela. An extraordinary development. And you asked, was this coordinated? It could only have been coordinated with at least.
Thank you, Mindspeak, for the $2 super chat. New York Times confirmed Maduro has been captured. Thank you, Mindspeak, for that super chat.
Some people who turned on Maduro because the people knew where he was. They knew where his family was. It sounds like he is still alive, and I would not be surprised if we see him in front of an American court in the coming weeks or months.
So this has been a dramatic series of developments taking place overnight in the early hours of this new year, January 3rd, shortly after 2 o'clock local time. The first reports from eyewitnesses on the ground of explosions taking place in and around the capital city of Caracas, Venezuela. And now, within a matter of minutes ago, we are hearing from the president again, detailing publicly, among other things, that the U.S. was behind what he described as a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, Nicolas Maduro. He says Maduro has been captured and flown out of the country alongside his wife. The president does not detail where they are being taken at this time. The president, who remains at his Mar-a-Lago.
We just got over the 25,000 subscriber hump today. We appreciate you being here.
Estate, his property in Palm Beach, Florida, says that this operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement and says that there will be a...
There we go.
Orders and the American people at a news conference to take place at about 11 o'clock Eastern time. I want to get back to Gabe Gutierrez, if I can, right now. He is our senior White House correspondent. Gabe, you're joining us by phone as well. You've been traveling with the president. They're speaking to some of his aides and allies over the course of the last week while most people were enjoying their holiday break. But the White House has been very focused on a variety of things. One, what's been taking place in Venezuela with a new series of boat strikes in recent days. That strike on a docking facility that the president himself revealed, though the U.S. has not said if the CIA was behind it. Separately, they've been focused on the situation between Russia and Ukraine as well. But the president, Gabe, as you and I have discussed together, has said publicly throughout that the desire is to end the transportation of illegal drugs into the United States, and the White House has sort of pushed back on the idea that this focus has been regime change. So the president himself said in an interview not long ago that Maduro's days were in effect numbered. This is a significant, notable change, and it does impact the U.S. in terms of its policy as it relates to Venezuela and to that region.
Well, Peter, this is just staggering news, that announcement by the president that not only did the U.S. carry out these strikes, but actually has captured Nicolas Maduro. And you're right, Peter. We have had conflicting messages from this administration over the past several months on what was the goal of these boat strikes and of this military buildup in the Caribbean. Certainly, a lot of skeptics of the administration wondered why send so many troops to the Caribbean just for, airstrikes on these alleged drug boats in and around the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. And now it appears that this a coordinated attack, an operation to remove Nicolas Maduro from power is just staggering news. And we had been hearing for quite some time, Peter, for the last several months. I remember speaking with some officials within the administration who did say that there had been some talks with members of Nicolas Maduro's inner circle, and that the administration was trying to get at least some of them to turn on Nicolas Maduro. Of course, we have many questions now about how exactly all this went down. What were the details? Did someone turn him in? How did this operation go down in the middle of the night, just after a holiday week? Certainly, we will hope to learn more of those details when the president speaks later on today in South Florida. But something I will bring up, Peter, and something we have not discussed, what happens now with leadership in Venezuela.
Right.
It was not very long ago that the leading Venezuelan opposition figure, Maria Corina Machado, she actually was recognized and accepted the Nobel Peace Prize for fighting for democracy. And she made this incredible, daring journey from being in hiding in Venezuela to collect her prize in Norway, despite government restrictions. So you remember during the first Trump administration, the president backed the opposition candidate then, Juan Guaido, while there were government protests back then, ongoing blackouts, hyperinflation, and unrest inside Venezuela. But those protests fizzled, and Maduro stayed in power. Clearly, that is not the case this time, and many questions about the future of leadership in that country now.
Gabe, stay with us. Richard Engel, stay with us. To our viewers who are waking up and watching this this historic moment with us right now, the United States, in the words of the president, has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela. The president adds that both its leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife have been captured and taken out of the country. Joining us now from the ground in Caracas, that is the capital city of Venezuela, is journalist Vanessa Herrero. Vanessa, I know you have heard the president's statement. You have seen what he has said. A matter of minutes ago when we spoke to you, you were reacting to strikes on the ground. Now you're reacting for the first time live to word that there is no longer a President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela right now. I want to get your reaction and what, if anything, you're hearing from those who are awake at this early hour there.
Well, I think, as you all said, this is a historic moment. If this, Trump just confirmed this, but of course, when the footage, the pictures, the story about how he was caught, if he resisted or not, what happened, when exactly, come to light, I'm sure we're gonna see a great deal of reaction, not only around Caracas, but in the entire country. This is exactly a moment in history. I mean, we're talking about 20 years of Chavismo just vanishing in over a night, over hours, not even a night, hours. I mean, this situation really, I believe now more than ever, now that Donald Trump just tweeted that, said that on his Truth Social, that I believe that this strike was absolutely caught out of the blue, caught unaware the Venezuelan government. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling there, but it's really huge news right now.
No, Ana Vanessa, I appreciate your being with us right now. The first voice from inside Venezuela, sharing the experiences you've had, what you have seen there. If you can just take a breath for a moment. You know this situation about as well as anybody. You've covered that region, spent so much time clearly in Venezuela. Just your gut. When you heard that news, what was your reaction?
I was absolutely shocked, to be honest. I didn't believe this could be possible. I still don't know. I still don't know what is happening right now. We don't have confirmation again about, at least from Venezuela. We don't have anyone saying that this happened or how it happened. But there are a lot of videos flowing around WhatsApp and social media showing helicopters near what they claim, the people recording claim to be the house of high government officials, Delcy Rodriguez, Jorge Rodriguez, Diosdado Cabello. We haven't heard from them. So we do know now about Nicolás Maduro and Silvia Flores, but we don't know about, for example, Maduro's number two, Diosdado Cabello, who is also a huge name for the U.S. government. We have no confirmation of his whereabouts. We don't know if his was affected by the strike, if he was in Caracas at the moment.
Live from Caracas, Venezuela.
We just don't know.
Well, Ana Vanessa, you know what's striking to me is we obviously need to get a better understanding from the White House and from others about the timeline that took place here. But we did quickly get a statement from the Venezuelan government after these strikes began, saying in effect that this was an extremely serious military act of aggression.
Yes.
So it raises questions about if Nicolas Maduro was no longer in a position to be leading, who is leading, who in the system is still governing, in effect, to be putting out these defiant statements directed at the United States, and what, if any, plan exists to help try to stabilize that country, as it were, in the immediate days and weeks that may follow here, without its leader, though a leader that the U.S. described as the head of a narco-terrorist state, without its president there on the ground.
Well, it is unknown because we just know, as I was telling you, we only know about Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores. We don't know, for example, about Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, or Jorge Rodriguez, the head of the Chavista-controlled Congress and the parliament. So we don't know, for example, if Delcy Rodriguez is still here, she should, if she's still in Venezuela, if she's not affected, she wasn't affected by the strikes, then we should hear from her in order to understand what's going to happen next. But if the high members, 6 or 7 high members of the Venezuelan government, Nicolas Maduro's government, were also maybe taken or affected, then we don't know what
Maduro has
the
been
protocol
captured.
be. We do know that Nobel laureate Maria Corina Machado, who is a key ally to Edmundo Gonzalez, who was the winner of 2024 elections, according to the vote tallies. We do know that she said that they have the transition already to start whenever Nicolas Maduro was out of power. So maybe we can expect the opposition to take the place and start this this so-called transition into maybe new elections.
Ana Vanessa Herrero, we are so grateful that we've been able to speak to you live for our rolling coverage of this historic developing news we've been watching from the ground in Caracas, Venezuela again. And we repeat it because it's so dramatic and I think, frankly, for a lot of people, quite stunning, as Ana Vanessa herself just said. The President of the United States making very clear that the U.S. has successfully carried out a large-scale strike in Caracas, Venezuela, that country's capital city, and the president says that its president, Nicolas Maduro, has been captured. He, alongside his wife, have been taken out of the country by the United States. I want, if I can, very quickly, to get back to Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent, for a moment. Richard, do you hear me?
Extraordinary development.
Richard, where does the U.S. take, I apologize for interrupting, where could the U.S. take Nicolas Maduro at a moment like this?
Egypt?
Well, you would take him into U.S. custody. You would take him to a warship because they were talking about helicopters. So you would take him to some sort of warship, and then from a warship, flown back to the United States. Again, this is very similar to Panama, very similar to Noriega. The U.S. went in, grabbed him, and then once he's in custody. So there are a series of steps, but these are the kind of operations that are carried out by Navy SEALs, Delta Force, close coordination with the CIA. The United States has some experience with this. The United States, for decades, was involved in a war on terrorism, is involved in in kill and capture operations all over the world. It would have been much easier to carry out an assassination campaign and clearly the United States knew where Nicolas Maduro was. Clearly there was coordination on the inside. It would have been far easier to do what Israel did in Iran. Pick your target and carry out an assassination strike. But it seems that they wanted to arrest him. They wanted him in custody. And the closest place that is American custody would be a warship, and then from the warship to the U.S. mainland. So I would be expecting that we will see Nicolas Maduro in front of an American court before too long, and it will be a moment for Marco Rubio to celebrate, a way for the Trump administration to prove it's serious about its exerting its force.
SEAL Team 6
in Latin America.
For
not forget one of the first things President Trump did was call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. He clearly wants to show dominance in America's backyard, and he has just carried out I don't want to say breathtaking, but a surprise secret operation.
Special Warfare Development Group.
The Venezuelan journalist you were talking to a short while ago said that she was shocked by this news. Peter, we were on air when this news came in. I almost asked you to repeat it. Did you really say the U.S. just went in and arrested Maduro?
Yeah.
Clearly they did. He had not been responding to the escalating pressure campaign. He had not been crying uncle. He had recently said that he was willing to negotiate. He was willing to collaborate. He was willing to find out a solution. It reminds me of the days of Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein in Iraq, when he was arrested, he'd been hiding in a hole, and the first thing he did is he put up his hands and he said, I am Saddam Hussein, and I am willing to negotiate. It was too late for negotiations at that stage, and he was taken into custody and then ultimately handed over to the Iraqis and executed. I think at this stage, Nicolas Maduro, who has already been called a terrorist, already been charged with narco crimes, will end up facing an American court and probably being sentenced to a litany of crimes.
Richard, I want to marinate in this moment for a sec about whatever type of operation it would require to be able to go in there and sweep up Nicolas Maduro.
Well, DevGru and SEAL Team 6, they've got 4 line squadrons. That's Red Squadron, Blue Squadron, Gold Squadron, and Silver Squadron. They also have a Black Squadron, which does the recon and all the intel on any of these targeted operations.
Take his wife with him as well out of that country, as the president said. The circumstances, of course, are very different, but there have been other operations that have been veiled in secrecy that stunned in many ways the world. You've been talking about the situation with Saddam Hussein, the very different circumstances. The United States back in 2011, of course, was able to go into Abbottabad, Pakistan, where they found Osama bin Laden, who had been hiding out there. That was a very He was not the leader of any country, of course. In fact, he was a terrorist leader, and he was killed in the course of that operation. But the U.S. ability to do this in secrecy, and at least to this point, we're waiting for any information about whether any Americans, whether there was any resistance, whether arms were fired at American troops, or whether the situation was not too dissimilar to the one you detail with Saddam Hussein, where he just put his hands up at the time. But the U.S. has, it reminds Americans of the unique capabilities the U.S. has when the orders come from the President of the United States, with the military involved, to do something of such a high and dramatic scale like this.
This would be the helicopter operation. You can't land a fixed-wing aircraft in the middle of a city. And witnesses in Caracas described hearing helicopters. So the reason you do a wide-scale military operation...
Once you hear those helicopters, it's too late.
Is to make sure that the forces going in are protected. Venezuela does have allies, and Russia does have anti-aircraft systems. Its military is a bit of a shambles. The country is under sanctions. There is an elite that has a lot of money, and then a great deal of poverty. Most of the refugees that are spreading around across Latin America, many of them come from Venezuela itself. So an impoverished nation that had been run by a dictator who has now been arrested. But it definitely demonstrates the U.S. capabilities. And I stress, because I've been speaking to mediators for months now, there has been an escalating pressure campaign directed...
You guys think they're going to bust out the phone book on Maduro, get him to talk?
Just on Maduro, but around his inner circle, the military around him, to hand him over. And Maduro's response was either to laugh it off. If you remember, he was seen in holding rallies, singing John Lennon songs, saying, "Imagine a time we can have peace." He was saying that this was just a great big American Yankee imperial plot, and he wasn't getting the message. People around him clearly got worried, and it seems like someone turned him in. With the U.S. military pressure in the region, with the strikes on the boat, and then that strike on land just before New Year's, I think you can see these now, how they line up, leading to what we saw overnight. An escalating campaign of military presence, boat strikes, a land strike, back channel negotiations to get the inner circle to turn on Maduro, and now a capture operation. You mentioned the Osama bin Laden. That was a kill operation. Kill operations are much easier. You know where he is, you bomb it,
Right.
it's over.
Yes, they are.
The Trump administration clearly wanted to take him, go power, and put him in front of a court.
Just to pull back the curtain to let our audience in on some of what happens behind the scenes during developments like this, we have been reaching out to to those who work at the White House and the Pentagon as well for any additional details. I've been texting as we speak with officials in and around the White House for any better details. We've now been asking where Nicolas Maduro has been taken, is being taken. They have yet to respond to that. Again, the president saying that he will hold a news conference to take place at about 11 o'clock, which is, what, if it's almost 5 o'clock here, roughly 6 hours from now. Richard, stay with us. Gabe Gutierrez, stay with us. I want to get for a moment to Will Freeman. He is a fellow for the Latin America Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. He is joining us now. Will, Happy New Year. We begin this conversation with developments that very few people imagine, certainly someone like yourself who is an expert in that region. I just want to get your reaction to the developments that Nicolas Maduro has been captured and flown out of the country by the United States.
Oof. I'm almost speechless. I mean, this is a completely shocking development. Look, I think we have to put this in perspective. I mean, this is a dictatorship that has consolidated power over 20 years. 8 million people have been forced from Venezuela. That's a quarter of the population. The biggest mass displacement in the recent history, maybe the all-time history of the Western Hemisphere. Hugely disruptive for all of South America, eventually the United States too. A regime that was implicated in all types of organized crime, including drug trafficking. I think that this is it's an unprecedented moment. We don't know what this looks like going forward. I think there is a potential, maybe a small one, but there is a potential that we're sitting here in a few days talking about a democratic transition in Venezuela, and I surely hope that that's the case, that somehow there has been an incredible feat of back-channel diplomacy here, and that you have the Trump administration having worked out a plan with a sector of the Venezuelan military and the opposition in that country that creates stability and a transition, one that Venezuelans overwhelmingly voted for last year in an election that Maduro robbed. Now, I said that I hope deeply for that outcome. But I fear another one, and I fear another one that may actually be more likely, which is that we have a vacuum of power in Venezuela, that you see the armed forces there split, disagree about what should happen next. And then we're in an extremely dangerous moment where even though you have Maduro out of the country, you may have just
definitely tactical precision strikes.
Thrust one of the major countries in South America into a total Pandora's box. I've just seen a video, not yet confirmed, but of Vladimir Padrino Lopez, the head of the Venezuelan armed forces, calling on the armed forces to fight back and resist this, right? So clearly, if that video is confirmed, a signal that he is not on board with what's happening now. So look, it's really just, it's a mystery what comes next. I really think we can't say yet. Does Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president of Maduro, has she made some kind of deal that she steps into power? Do we see, this is also something to be feared. Do we see a hardliner, if he's still surviving right now, like Diosdado Cabello, one of the toughest, most authoritarian figures in the Maduro regime? Does he step in and fill the vacuum? And I think there's a lot of questions about how does the U.S. exert leverage on what happens next without our own troops on the ground, right? So we're going to have to just here. I think, talking to Venezuelan friends, sources on the ground, there's a mix of disbelief, hope that somehow this terrible situation the country's been in could finally be ending, fear, of course.
Like and subscribe, guys. Like and subscribe.
And again, I think we're going to have to wait and see if
make
that,
sure you hit your
unlikely, but
we have lots of breaking stories here on the Zero Dark Tony Show.
Hopeful scenario that there is change here, if that bears out, or if we're in a much darker, more dangerous situation.
Will Freeman is an expert of Latin American studies with the Council on Foreign Relations. He's speaking to us here live on NBC News right now during our rolling coverage after learning that the U.S. has successfully, in the words of the President of the United States, carried out a large-scale strike there, captured and flown out of the country. Its leader, who the U.S. described as an illegitimate leader, Nicolas Maduro. Will, just to pull, I think a lot of Americans are going to wake wake up this morning to major headlines. They're waking up if they're watching us right now. And there was a lack of familiarity with Venezuela, its role in that region. Obviously, oil is central in terms of its economy right now. The narco-terrorist regime, as the White House describes it, has obviously relied heavily on the trafficking of drugs, much of it cocaine that goes to Europe. The president making accusations that it also includes fentanyl going to the United States. Help us better understand the significance of Venezuela in that region and how it sort of falls into all the different pieces of South America right now vis-a-vis the United States.
Right. Well, first off, I'd say, look, Latin America is a region of democracies overwhelmingly. There are only 3 dictatorships remaining in the region, right? Those are Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, where Venezuela is by far the largest country by area, by geostrategic importance, by population. As I mentioned before, 8 million Venezuelans, a quarter of the population, have fled under Maduro's rule. And that of his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. So just an incredible exodus of people, leaving millions of refugees and asylum seekers in Colombia, Peru, 500,000 in Brazil and the United States each. So there's been that disruption. And you have also seen, Venezuela under Maduro turn into a mafia state, where the regime is deeply embedded in illegal gold mining, cocaine trafficking, although not fentanyl. That is not true, what the White House claims there. We have no evidence to suggest that. And all types of other corruption. I think it's been a situation where ordinary Venezuelans have tried again and again to come onto the streets to protest, to bring about change. They've voted in elections. They've elected in 2015 a supermajority for the opposition that wasn't really allowed to legislate. Last year, they elected an opposition president by a landslide.
I think there's going to be a very short shelf life for any regimes in the future.
To take power. Maduro simply stole the vote. So they've tried everything in their power. And, again, that's why so many people are leaving, because they didn't feel that there was any other path forward, any path for hope in the country. Now, I do want to come back to the fact that when you look at democratic transitions around the world, the military, part of the military, always has to be on board. So otherwise, if you don't have that, if you don't have part of the military agreeing to the transition, guiding it, you end up with chaos. You end up often with civil war, with the power vacuum. And I think that that's what a lot of critics of the current strategy are very worried about, right? It's that we see a situation here more like Libya post-Arab Spring, more like Iraq eventually after the U.S. intervention there, and not a situation like, say, Panama in 1989, where you had the extraction of that country's narco president and a very quick transition to democracy. But again, because there were U.S. boots on the ground, there were U.S. forces to guide that transition. You're not going to have that here in Venezuela, for all that we know. I mean, right now we have 15,000 U.S. military personnel, give or take, off the coast in the Caribbean. That's not even anywhere near the quantity you'd need to hold and control critical transit lines along, or transport routes along the path to Caracas and the city itself. So look, I think the best case scenario here is that the Trump administration has worked out a deal with the parts of the Venezuelan military, powerful ones, and that they've agreed to some kind of negotiated transition where the opposition will gain some power. Unfortunately, probably they'll receive some amount of impunity, but that's the best case. The worst case is that none of that planning has been done, and that we're going to find out tomorrow that there's no day after plan, that it was somehow magically hoped that the opposition would simply take power, and that doesn't happen, and that we either get a worse version of Maduro in office or no one is in control, right? In which case you may see much larger outmigration from Venezuela. You may see drug traffickers and other crime groups gain even deeper control of the country. So this is a roll of the dice, and I don't want to pass any conclusion yet about what's going to happen. Clearly, we don't know very much, but it's just it injects an incredible amount of uncertainty into Latin America. I would say maybe as much as you've ever seen since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, we're talking about an event of those proportions.
Will Freeman, your expertise is invaluable to us right now, and we appreciate your honesty and the assessment that you, like so many others, are sort of just stunned by the news that we're seeing right now, and we will watch as this plays out over the course of the next several hours. Days, and hope to get a better minute-by-minute understanding of what took place before dawn, even as we anticipate the sun to rise shortly over Caracas very soon. stay with us. We're going to want to revisit with you, obviously, as we continue with our developing coverage here. I want to get very quickly, as we come close to the top of the hour, back to our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel. Richard, you heard from Will Freeman there detailing what the United States Southern Command had said only a matter of days ago. I think it was back in December, where they said there were about 15,000 U.S. forces who were there in the region. The president described them as part of a, quote, massive armada. As he said, the U.S. is in no position, though, with that number to sort of control Venezuela were that necessary. And he detailed this sort of fork in the road we now face about the potential, perhaps, for a Democratic-led government, but also the real concern and fear that the vacuum could be filled with others sort of in the image of Nicolas Maduro, who share his view, his condemnation of the United States.
Well, I think he described it perfectly, that Venezuela is now at a fork in the road. It will either go and have a successful democratic transition, and there is an opposition. Just won Nobel Peace Prize. Venezuela had an election, which Nicolas Maduro stole. So will the legitimate opposition be able to take power in a relatively smooth way? Or did President Trump just plunge Venezuela into a civil war? He's absolutely right. 15,000 troops are not nearly enough to occupy a country the size of Venezuela and manage a transition. There were more than 120,000 troops in Iraq, sometimes more than that, and about 1 million troops cycled through the country. And Iraq still plunged into civil war, so more troops had to be added in order to stop the civil war. He mentioned Libya, which I think is a key example. The United States never occupied Libya, never had troops on the ground. Just did in that case, it was an assassination operation to remove Muammar Gaddafi and plunged Libya into civil war. So this is a very dangerous crossroads. The one advantage that Venezuela does have is it has a strong, legitimate opposition that has been recognized internationally, that President Trump wants to do business with, that has a credible leader. But will the military allow that? Will factions of the military allow that? And oil. Let's not forget about oil. We can talk about that more with later guests.
Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent, has been joining us. Our colleague Keir Simmons is joining us as well. Gabe Gutierrez, our senior White House correspondent, as we continue with this rolling coverage of the United States and the strikes that it has carried out taking place in Venezuela over the course of the last several hours. As we come upon 5 o'clock, we want to give our audiences a chance, as we will reset it very quickly again. I'm Peter Alexander here live with this special report, our live developing coverage of the situation on the ground taking place in the capital city of Caracas, Venezuela. Overnight, first beginning at about 2 o'clock Eastern time, we learned about strikes taking place, strikes that you see on the ground there, those fiery explosions in around the capital city of Caracas. And then shortly after 4 o'clock this morning, the President Trump, detailing in a post on his preferred social media megaphone, Truth Social, saying the United States of America has successfully carried out what he called a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who has been, in the president's words, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. Again, Nicolas Maduro and his wife have been flown out of the country. The president saying that Maduro was captured. The operation, he says, was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. The president said more details would follow, that there would be a news conference taking place this morning at 11 o'clock at Mar-a-Lago, the president's Florida estate, where he has been spending most of the Christmas and New Year's holiday. It is signed by the president himself. We have spoken to a journalist on the ground, our eyewitness there, who detailed just what she described in effect as a breathtaking moment. Her stunned surprise that this had occurred, that the U.S. had been able to carry out such a thing, the anxiety At the same time, the hope in that region that a democratic government may ultimately come to power. But as we have heard from our experts throughout the region as well, there are also real concerns that that power vacuum could be filled by others who sort of fit into that same image of Nicolas Maduro, in the words of the White House, illegitimate
in Venezuela
leader. We should now say former leader, as he has been removed from the country, the head of what the U.S. describes as a narco-terrorist.
He ain't the leader no more.
Regime. I want to get to our chief international correspondent. That's Keir Simmons. Keir, you, like all of us, have been watching these dramatic developments punctuating a pressure campaign, a series of threats and warnings and accusations from the White House, where the White House was, in effect, trying to get Maduro to cry uncle, and it appears he wouldn't do that. And ultimately, at the president's orders,
hit that like button for me, guys. Thank you.
The U.S. went in and picked him up. Your reactions and your thoughts as we witness this history.
Yes, it is.
Well,
now
I think it's stunning
here in Los Angeles.
And I think it's also, in many senses, not surprising, given the past year. Of course, we just ticked over that first year in the second administration of President Trump. And we have known from the Trump administration through that first year that the focus has been on the Western Hemisphere, that there's been a determination to look at Latin America and if you like, what you might describe as America's kind of near abroad. That's the way, for example, the Russians describe countries like Ukraine and Eastern Europe. That's the way that China describes places that are close to its borders. There has been that determination, and there has been that military build-up, and yet at the same time, Peter, to wake up and for many people and to see that this is happening in this way will be shocking. I think one of the questions that we're going to be asking in the coming days through the weekend is what will be the reaction of some of Venezuela's partners, global partners, and that includes Russia, for example. I mean, just in the past days, in the past weeks, we saw a ship heading from Venezuela. We saw the Russians, we saw Moscow ask the Trump administration not to target it. The U.S. was pursuing it. The U.S. Coast Guard was pursuing it. The Russians intervened there. How will President Putin react now to this? It's likely that he will be very critical of it. And what impact will that have then on his own decisions? And the same with President Xi in Beijing, China's leader. How will China respond? It's very likely that the Russians, for example, will be powerless in the immediate term. If you think back, for example, to the fraud of
natural gas,
in
gold,
Syria, which
iron
was
ore,
supported
diamonds,
by President Putin and by Moscow. Effectively, Russia did very little except for offer effectively asylum to the leader of Syria at that time when there was when that uprising in Syria overwhelmed him. So that I think is an important question.
Nuclear fuel.
Asked another important question: what happens inside Venezuela now? Is there who comes to power? What you are seeing in U.S. foreign policy, and we've seen it now on a number of occasions. Just take, for example, President Trump weighing in militarily with Iran last year. What you're seeing is the Trump administration use U.S. power, but from a distance, a long arm of U.S. force, not put boots on the ground.
Live in Los
Of
Angeles
course,
here.
that's not surprising because the American people are not in favor of U.S. boots on the ground. So once again, we will be asking the question, and Richard described it very well. Once again, we'll be asking the question, what is possible with air power and with naval power, but without the boots on the ground, without the army, without actually taking power, and what is the plan in Venezuela? That is, I think, something that that we'll need an answer to that. We'll need an answer to that in terms of what the Trump administration's thinking is in the coming days.
Keir Simmons is our chief international correspondent. He's joining us on the air right now again as we get a better understanding of the situation on the ground in Caracas, Venezuela, in that country after the president announced the large-scale strikes that have taken place, that the U.S. has captured and flown Nicolas Maduro and his wife out of the country. That capture, Keir, gives us a better understanding of what we were first reporting over the course of the last several hours, that low-flying helicopters were spotted there, not just fiery explosions, but low-flying helicopters in that region as well, which would be required for, excuse me, an operation of this kind, where the U.S. wasn't just striking, but it was, in effect, a capture operation where they were picking up Nicolas Maduro, the leader of that country. We are hearing from a variety of...
Nicolas Maduro is no longer the leader of that country if he has been captured by the U.S. military. I'll tell you that right now.
Individuals now beginning to wake up on the East Coast in the United States. Among them, Mike Lee. He is the senator from Utah, has been outspoken in his criticism of the president's efforts around the world, but most notably recently in Venezuela. The Republican for Utah posting within the last hour, "I look forward to learning what, if anything, might constitutionally justify this action in the absence of a declaration of war or authorization for the use of military force." That's where lawmakers will go in terms of this conversation in the days and weeks ahead. But in the immediate hours following this, Keir, the real focus obviously is on what happens in Venezuela itself. What are the next steps, the plans to follow up these strikes that we have witnessed take place over the course of these pre-dawn hours in Venezuela?
That's right, and I think another question is where is Maduro? Where has he been? Where has he gone? Clearly, there are places that are sympathetic to Venezuela that are close. It could be that if he's been, though, evacuated, if you like, if he's been taken.
Nicolas Maduro and his wife are spending the evening in the brig on a United States aircraft carrier.
As you describe, and that looks very likely, then you would have to potentially look to countries that have a relationship with the U.S. And would be prepared to take him, if you like. There is the question of again of Russia and President Putin. Russia is closely is a close partner of Venezuela, the Maduro regime. So again, that's a possible place to look, but there are many possibilities of where he is, and of course, one aspect of this is that in terms of the way that you would want. The way that you would plan this, if you were the Trump administration, is you wouldn't want to hear from Maduro in the coming days, while the country itself, as you describe, is figuring out, kinetically, frankly, figuring out what happens next. And again, we simply don't know. So what happens in the coming hours will be out of control a little bit. Until we know whether or not there is actually some kind of a strategy beyond removing Maduro.
NBC's chief international correspondent is Keir Simmons. He's been joining us with more details about the situation that is taking place on the ground here. And Keir, as you were describing, this is significant for a variety of reasons, not just obviously for what it does in terms of the leadership of that country, but the sort of impact it has globally as it relates to the economy and beyond oil. One of the Venezuela, one of, if not the largest producer of oil in the world. The U.S. in recent weeks, we have witnessed, has been targeting, seizing at least one and a series of other oil tankers in that region.
Like that, the Maduro regime is over in Venezuela.
Region with sanctioned oil that the U.S. had been focused on. The president has also been heavily focused on targeting drug trafficking from that country, accusing Venezuela of bringing fentanyl to the United States. In fact, our Latin American expert a short time ago saying that that's not true. Fentanyl does not come from Venezuela to the U.S. They are, though, largely engaged in providing other drugs like cocaine, which most often, according to our experts, goes overseas to Europe right now. But the point you make is a good one, Keir, specifically about what happens to Nicolas Maduro. Where is he now? And then what happens on the ground in the country that he has now just left from? And beyond that, what happens to the U.S., the massive armada, in the president's words, those 15,000 troops off the coast there? Of course, there is only so much the United States can do from a distance, but Maduro did not work alone. He had a hierarchy within his government of others who have been posting statements even as we speak over the course of the last several.
Put a 1 in the chat if you think somebody very close to Maduro gave him up for this operation. Put a 1 in the chat.
Hours in defiance of the actions taking place, even before we knew that Maduro had been captured and taken out. The Venezuelan government posting a short time ago that this was an extremely serious military act of aggression, condemning the United States actions here. I want, if we can, to bring back into this conversation NBC's Gabe Gutierrez, our senior White House correspondent. Oh, sorry, Gabe's not with us for the moment as we give him a chance to speak to his sources there. So let's get to Richard Engel then, if we can, for a second. And Richard, we've been talking over the course of the early hours of this morning. It is the latest effort by the president of the United States, who sort of came to power in the United States with a desire to focus on domestic issues, to pull the U.S. out of wars. And in fact, we've seen him strike Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, and the most recent strike, the Caribbean, Pacific, the most recent strike in Venezuela. And this one is unique, unlike any of the others, in effect, because it removes that country's leader from power and does create this vacuum. One, of course, the U.S. is hoping to fill with a more stable, more democratic-minded government.
Peter, extraordinary day. The U.S. President Trump carried out a regime change.
The old regime change. There it is.
Change operation overnight in Venezuela. On one of the first days of the year, this
Repetition
is how we are
through the
beginning.
media.
We are now in somewhat uncharted territory. We don't know who is going to take over. It seems fairly clear that Trump custody. I would assume that right now they are in a controlled location, potentially a warship or some other third country, but heading to the United States. Charges have been prepared against them. And this is sending a message all over the world that President Trump wants to dominate this region, that he takes he wants his threats to be taken seriously.
I'm Maduro.
Nicolas Maduro's days were numbered. And apparently now we know what that number was, because it seems, according to President Trump, is no longer in power and has been arrested in an operation, the kind of operation that we've seen been carried out in the past by Navy SEALs, Delta Force, the CIA. Before you reset at the top of the hour, I briefly mentioned oil. You talked about how Venezuela produces a great amount of oil. The real potential for Venezuela is, however, their oil reserves, particularly a kind of heavy oil that the U.S. industrial base is very dependent on. And Venezuela has the largest known oil reserves in the world. So this is a very fundamental part of the calculation. President Trump has talked about the oil. He's talked about his biggest criticism with removing Saddam Hussein was that the United States never got the oil. So clearly, President Trump wanted regime change, wanted Maduro gone. He wasn't leaving. Now he's been arrested, and this administration will want another more U.S.-friendly government that can work out oil deals with the United States. Now, whether that reality happens is the open question. Will there be civil war? Will there be factions of the military that try and fight against a new leadership?
Hit that like button for me, guys. Like and subscribe.
Next period develop is
live coverage
maybe one of the most
Caracas,
critical that we've
Venezuela.
seen in Latin America in many decades. Because removing a dictator is one thing, and the U.S. did that overnight with precision and with a military display, attacking numerous military targets, witnesses describing helicopters. So a special operations type mission took place. But now, what about the stabilization? What about the new transition? And if I can go back, Keir Simmons, who was with us a moment ago. Now, Keir, you've interviewed Vladimir Putin. You know Russia well. The U.S. President Trump just asserted his authority in Latin America. You talked about how we're going to watch for Vladimir Putin's response. Do you think Putin and President Xi of China will see what President Trump did and think that they now can do what they want in their sphere of influences? Does this undercut President Trump's claim that Vladimir Putin should never have invaded Ukraine when he goes into foreign countries and arrests their leaders? Does this support China's claim that it can go into Taiwan at a time and place of its choosing and change that government? How do you think China and Russia will see this, and do you think it will encourage them to take more action, direct action, regime change level action in their own neighborhoods?
Keir, do you hear us?
Uh-oh.
Richard will let
I'm not sure if
he may not hear us at the moment.
Out. I think he wasn't here.
He hears you now. Keir, go ahead.
Richard, can you hear me?
We hear you, Keir. Go ahead.
I can hear you now. Yes, you left us waiting. You built suspense.
Yeah, listen, I was saying that
3 minutes.
I think you posed the question well, Richard. And the question, one of the questions in all of this is, does this indicate to other powers around the world in what is rapidly becoming what experts describe as a multipolar world? Does this indicate to other powers around the world that it is okay to use your power to intervene in neighboring regions, in other countries where you feel you have an interest, even a vital interest? Now, of course, we've already seen Russia do that in Ukraine, so it's not as if other countries have been waiting for permission from the United States in many ways. And China, as you rightly point out, has a policy of reunification with Taiwan at some point in the future. I should say that the Chinese policy is that it hopes that happens peacefully. But what I think this does do too, it's another piece of this, is it further pushes those powers towards the idea of influencing your own neighborhood. And this strike by the Trump administration in Venezuela comes just weeks after it issued its national security strategy, in which it specifically talked about...
Let's get this video to 200 likes, guys. Hit that like button for me. Let's get this to 200 likes. Thank you to the new subscribers. Hello, Electra.
That strategy specifically talked about U.S. influence in the Western Hemisphere. It even, and Richard, you will know this well, it even referenced a U.S. policy from the 19th century called the Monroe Doctrine, which was a policy that the U.S. had a right to take action and influence particularly countries in its region. And that was mentioned in the National Security Strategy as a policy of the United States. Now, let's just frame this in terms that the Trump administration would view it, and that is this. The Trump administration might say, actually, it is in America's vital interests to ensure that there is that it lives in a region that is not a threat to it, and which is able to, and that it lives in a region that as far as possible is stable and democratic. Of course, whether or not strikes like these lead to stability is a point that you've been making, Richard, and it's an important one. But the Trump administration might say that drug trafficking is a threat to it, and it has used that as a justification for the strikes on boats that we've seen in recent weeks. And it might say that Venezuela, with its close relationship with Russia, with its close relationship with Iran, Iran, with its relationship with China, that is not something that's acceptable for the United States so close to the U.S. mainland. So this idea of the Monroe Doctrine has many facets, and it has a logic to it. But again, one of the issues here will be, Richard, whether or not, and this is something that people will be talking about in the days to come, weeks to come, frankly, given how significant this is in the months to come, whether or not this is something that is going to lead to a more stable region. Very often the United States has intervened in this manner in countries and not managed to bring about a more democratic, stable neighbor. So these are all issues that I think will be grappled with as we look ahead. And again, we simply don't know at this stage what the next coming days are going to be like in Venezuela and what is going to emerge from all of this.
Richard Keir, we appreciate both of you. I want you gentlemen to stay with us for a second. Just want to update you with some other information we've been receiving as we've been having these conversations right now. The president posting his statement a short time ago that Maduro has been captured, that he and his wife have been flown out of the country. We are hearing from a deputy secretary of state. We do know that the secretary of state himself, Marco Rubio, was with the president
Caracas,
yesterday
Venezuela.
at his Mar-a-Lago property. Marco Rubio there, but this
president of Venezuela has been captured along with his wife by the U.S. military and taken into custody.
Christopher Landau, one of his deputies, who said a new dawn for Venezuela, referring to Maduro. He said the tyrant is gone. He will now finally face justice for his crimes. We are out to the Justice Department for any better indications. As the president said, the operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. For any better details about where Maduro is being taken, whether he will face charges here in the United States, and in effect what that would look like, we should note that in March of 2020, in the waning months of President Trump's first term, the U.S. did, among other things, say that it was imposing filing charges against Nicolas Maduro. In effect, in absentia at the time, the Justice Department at the time saying that Maduro and other
live stream just hit 85,000 views. Thank you very much, everybody, for checking in.
High-ranking Venezuelan officials were being charged with narco-terrorism, corruption, drug trafficking, and other criminal charges. Another administration the Biden administration had come to power here in the United States in the time between that. And so the question is what, in effect, it would look like, whether we would see Nicolas Maduro in a court of law in some form in the United States. But Richard and Keir and Gabe Gutierrez, our senior White House correspondent, who are all with us right now, I want to focus on what's been happening in the last few hours while folks have been waking up across the U.S. as, again, we see on a loop now this video of fiery explosions throughout the capital city of Caracas there. We wait to get better details on exactly what the targets were. We have spoken about helicopters flying, hovering and flying just above the buildings, above the ground there. Clearly, they would have been necessary for any operation of this kind to sweep up to capture Nicolas Maduro. We are waiting for better understanding if this was a negotiated handover, in effect, if Maduro had spoken in some form of private negotiation with the U.S., promising to give himself up, or if he was seized, the president says captured, which would indicate it was against his
better not resist
will. But this is a very dramatic situation to take place. Before we said it was a dramatic escalation of an effort by the U.S. to crack down on Nicolas Maduro. That escalation has now reached its conclusion, which is the departure of Nicolas Maduro. Gabe, talk to us, if you can, our senior White House correspondent, Gabe Gutierrez, about how we have been building to this moment under President Trump, who,
the old
a matter of
regime
months ago in
change.
October said, among other things, to use his language, he used an expletive, don't F with the United States, was the warning he gave to Nicolas Maduro, more recently saying that his days could be numbered.
Yeah, that's right, Peter. Very strong words from President Trump throughout his entire second administration. And as you alluded to, throughout his first administration, it was in January of 2019 that the U.S. formally recognized Juan Guaido as the opposition leader. That opposition fizzled during his first administration. You mentioned the charges that the DOJ brought against Maduro and several top aides back in 2020. But really, during this administration and under Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who also happens to be the National Security Advisor, the Trump administration has really zeroed in on Nicolas Maduro and Venezuela. Now, there had been early on in this administration some negotiations with the Maduro government. Rick Grenell, an envoy to Venezuela, there was even some cooperation with Venezuela accepting some migrant flights and even having an exchange, releasing some prisoners to the U.S. That was months ago. That seems like an eternity
he waited
away
too long.
Because really, over the last 6 months especially, the Secretary of State and top Trump administration officials, including Stephen Miller, who you mentioned, by the way, Peter, Stephen Miller at Mar-a-Lago last night, Secretary
Correct.
of State Marco Rubio at Mar-a-Lago last night. They really have been ramping up the pressure over the last few months. We have been speaking ad nauseum about the increased military presence in the Caribbean. So many questions about what that was building towards, and it now seems to be that all along, or at least very recently, things have escalated so much that they were able to make the decision to go in and, in the president's words, capture Nicolas Maduro. We're expecting to hear more from the president later on this morning, 11 o'clock. He says he will speak to the press and perhaps answer some of these questions. Chief among them, where will Nicolas Maduro be taken? What becomes of that $50 million reward for information leading to his arrest that the FBI had increased just several months ago? But you're right, Peter. President Trump had been saying that Nicolas Maduro's days were numbered. His administration had given conflicting messages on the purpose of those airstrikes on those alleged drug boats. Was it to combat drugs coming into the U.S.? Was it to rattle?
We're going to jump into the BBC right here. We're going to see Venezuela demands Maduro
proof of life. The Maduro supporters want to see that he is alive, and so is Celia Flores, his wife. But I don't think we're going to get any updates along those lines necessarily until we get to a press conference in Mar-a-Lago at 4 p.m. London time. So I think that is probably the likeliest outcome, that we'll get the information then. It does put into context the idea that there were helicopters, U.S. military helicopters, over Venezuela, over Caracas's skies, in the midst of those attacks on the military bases. If those things are related, if this was all a coordinated operation, then those helicopters could have been either carrying in or out the Delta team that took Nicolas Maduro and took Celia Flores. It is extraordinary, and that Venezuelans will be digesting this news, figuring it out, and with each update that comes from the defense minister, from the vice president, it's more, if you like, of
and that is the breaking news now
by the Venezuelan government. It's about
rolling coverage is going to bring up information by the moment.
You know, the military chiefs and the defense minister talking about continuing to fight, mobilizing the military, mobilizing the civilian militias, and basically remaining in place, not accepting that Washington has somehow.
So
now they want to know that he is safe.
Nicolas Maduro, and try to force him from power. Chief of Staff Susie Wiles in a recent interview said it was to make Maduro cry uncle. Well, not sure if he cried uncle or whether this was some negotiated exit, but according to the president, the end result of this is Nicolas Maduro is out of Venezuela. Staggering headline, historic news for that country. And now we will see how this plays out. Already, the statements of condemnation from neighboring countries. Colombia's president outraged by this. Cuba's president as well, of course, with its significant ties to Venezuela's government. And, Peter, by the way, when we first heard about these explosions in just a few hours ago, around 2 o'clock local Caracas time, we did get a statement from the Venezuelan government just a short time after that. It was an initial statement, unclear. It was not signed by Nicolas Maduro, obviously. There were questions about his whereabouts. We now know, according to the president, that he was captured. Who is leading Venezuela right now? We don't know the answer to that question. And as you've been speaking with Richard and Keir and our other analysts, a major question will be, does this turn into a power vacuum? Does the U.S. support the opposition leader and somehow, does she come into power, or is there some sort of fighting in between different factions of Venezuela's government, the military? So many unanswered questions right now that we hope to learn more from the president himself in just a few hours this morning, Peter.
Gabe Gutierrez is our senior White House correspondent. He has been traveling with the president over much of this holiday break, has been a short distance from Mar-a-Lago, watching as the president has met with some of his top advisors and aides, celebrating some of the holidays, also likely meeting privately about some of the situations that we are witnessing now taking place overseas. Again, as we look at these pictures from earlier this morning, again before dawn, and as it approaches 6:30 in the morning in Venezuela, it's certain that dawn will break soon, and that country will wake up to a new dawn, a country for the first time and in a long period that is governed. It's not clear by whom, certainly not governed by its former president, Nicolas Maduro, who the president of the United States, Donald Trump, a short time ago announced has been captured by the U.S. and has been taken out of this country. We're going to take a brief moment right now to reset. Stay with us for this live coverage. Rubio informed him that Nicolas Maduro has been arrested by U.S. personnel to stand trial on criminal charges in the United States, and that the kinetic action, the strikes that we saw tonight in effect, was deployed to protect and defend those executing the arrest warrant. So that this was the primary mission, the strikes, in the words of Mike Lee, detailing what he was told by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, that those strikes were basically to help protect those who were executing this arrest warrant. This action, Lee adds, likely falls within the president's inherent authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to protect U.S. personnel from an actual or imminent attack. Now, the lawmakers will, of course, fight over the circumstances behind this, how this is being conducted. But let's focus again on what we know is happening right now with our senior national
regime change playbook.
Security correspondent Courtney Kuby, who is up early as we begin this new year together. Courtney, again, the major headline there, the capture of Nicolas Maduro and the successful carrying out of this large-scale strike against Venezuela. What are your sources telling you? Do we have any better understanding of who would have been behind this effort? Obviously, it requires some of the special forces type units to be able to accomplish a mission of this kind.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to keep in mind here, Peter, is the U.S. military, when it's come to some of these recent actions in the region, so specifically the interdictions of these oil tankers, the military has been in support of law enforcement here. Based off of the way the president posted this on Truth Social, his own social media platform, of course, that he started, based on the way that he wrote about this, it does appear that this was law enforcement that was in the lead here. We're still trying to get more information about that. The U.S. military, though, it appears was involved in sort of shaping the locations so that the law enforcement and potentially other U.S. agencies would be able to go in.
Sorry, Courtney, please continue.
Would be able to go in and sort of clear the space so that they could go in and then arrest Nicolas Maduro and his wife or take them into custody. So the kinds of things that we are seeing from social media video, as we know, we've seen the statement from the president, but that's really all the detail that we're getting. The video does appear to show transport helicopters, Chinooks, but there also appear to be some smaller helicopters there. Now, we don't know what those are. But we do know what is in the region right now. There is a very elite Air Force unit known as the 160th Special Operations. You may have heard of them because they were involved in taking the Navy SEALs into bin Laden's compound in May of 2011. They have assets there, including Little Birds, so these tiny little helicopters that move very fast, fly low to the ground. So we know that those sorts of assets are in the area that could have been used here. But I also found it very interesting that President Trump didn't specifically refer to the strikes that occurred as sort of the shaping operations in advance of the U.S. personnel going in on the ground there. He didn't necessarily refer to those as airstrikes. And remember some other assets the U.S. has built up. Remember, over the last couple of months, the military has flooded that region with a ton of air power and power at sea. Power at sea is the key here. They have a number of different ships who have the ability to launch Tomahawks, TLAMs. Those are very precise missiles. We have seen the U.S. military launch them in recent years in many different cases, so many cases, Libya, Syria, other times, where they need to hit a specific target and they need what's known as standoff capability. So essentially, they want to be free or safe from any kind of air defenses or other systems in the area that they are trying to target. So at this point, it's not clear exactly what the Venezuelan military may have done in response to any of this. We have not seen any indication
Make sure you hit that like button
that there was
for me,
any
guys.
kind of immediate
I appreciate
response
it.
when the aircraft were going or when these strikes were occurring. But remember another thing that the military has been doing in recent weeks and months now, and that is flying missions close to the airspace that would become Venezuelan airspace. So right up to the border of international airspace, international waters, right up to the border of Venezuela. A lot of times the military will do that for a reason. It's not just testing routes. It's not just seeing what they can see. It's trying to figure out exactly what the air defense is in a place, how they respond to an aircraft. So it's known as painting an aircraft. Does the air defenses that are potentially lined up along the border there of Venezuela, are they latching onto U.S. military aircraft when they fly up close to Venezuelan airspace? This would give the military, over the course of the last several weeks when we've seen them do this time and time again, even with things like long-range bombers, are the Venezuelan air defenses painting those aircraft? How quickly do they respond? This gives the military, the U.S. military, essentially a pattern of life of how the Venezuelan military would respond to aircraft flying in. So all of these things that we have seen occur over the last several weeks and months with the military, the buildup, the exercises, the routines that they have been flying, what they have been doing, it appears that it's all been building up to this, Peter. But the big question that we still don't have a good answer to is,
Caracas,
beyond the
Venezuela.
strikes and beyond what appears to be providing a lift to law enforcement and other U.S. officials as part of this picking up Maduro and his wife, what other component, what other part did the U.S. military play? And so we just don't have an answer to that at this point, Peter.
Courtney Kuby covers the Pentagon for us right now. I want to share some other information while you, Courtney, have been speaking. Again, as we're monitoring the situation there, as we try to get a better understanding of Nicolas Maduro's whereabouts and the evolving situation there. The New York Times posting a short time ago that it has spoken to President Trump early this morning, where in its words, it celebrated the success of the mission to capture the Venezuelan president. They quote President Trump saying, "A lot of good planning and a lot of great troops and great people," he said. He said it was a brilliant operation, actually. The Times asked him if he had sought congressional authority for the operation or what is next for Venezuela. And when asked that question, the president said he would address those matters during a news conference to take place at Mar-a-Lago this morning, his private club there in Florida. The president announcing earlier that would take place at roughly 11 a.m. Eastern time. We should also tell you that Venezuela's vice president there has spoken on state-run television after the president's post this morning saying that Nicolas Maduro's location was unknown and that she was asking President Trump for proof of life. Again, it raises real questions about the governance of that country in this time with what the president describes as a massive armada of 15,000 American troops, forces off the coast of that country. I want to bring in now the NBC News military analyst, the Colonel Steve Warren, who is joining us this morning. Colonel Warren, Happy New Year. We are off to the races as we begin this new year again. The president wasting no time at the start of the year in his pressure campaign against Nicolas Maduro, ultimately, as he said this morning, capturing him and his wife, taking them out of the country. Unclear if this was a negotiated exit, but as the Republican Senator Mike Lee said, the strikes that we saw early this morning were done in effect to protect the executing of that arrest warrant, the effort by those forces to pick him up. I know you haven't been involved, obviously, in what's taking place there, but give us a sense about how something like this would be conducted, how challenging it is, and what considerations would have gone into place in advance of a dramatic capture operation like this?
Peter, often our more elite, what we call the Tier 1, so this is our most elite special forces. Often our Tier 1 special forces will operate in conjunction with many other agencies throughout the government, whether it's the CIA, as we may likely have seen in that initial potential ground strike, that first ground strike we saw several days ago, or often law enforcement agencies. It is not uncommon for the Tier 1 special operators to work with law enforcement agencies. Particularly, we did this, I think, fairly regularly during the Iraq-Afghanistan conflict. So our special forces operations and our more elite law enforcement operators are familiar with working with each other. Now, as far as how an operation like this comes together, it's an extraordinary and complicated thing to do, and real praise to our soldiers and sailors and law enforcement officials who were able to pull this off. So far, we haven't received any reports of U.S. casualties, which is an extraordinary thing, and we're really proud of our men and women who executed it. But it takes there's sort of several layers, and Courtney Kube referenced it a little bit just moments ago. Initially, you have to ensure that you have the ability to get our aircraft into the target area without being shot down. So we have to execute what we call the suppression of enemy air defenses. So that could be some of the early explosions that we saw, as Courtney mentioned. As our correspondent Courtney Kube mentioned, possibly the use of Tomahawks or other remote capabilities to damage or destroy air defense radars and air defense launchers, right? So that's the initial execution. The next thing we like to try and do is isolate. So once we've suppressed air defense, we then try to isolate the target area. In this case, apparently we somehow knew where Nicolas Maduro and his wife were. It's unclear whether that was because we had spoken with them. We don't know how we knew this, but somehow we knew where Maduro may well have been, and we isolated that area. That can be done, again, through remote capabilities, or it could be done with actual troops on the ground to provide what we call security. And then finally, special forces operators, along most likely with some sort of federal law enforcement, whether it's a marshal or FBI. At this point, we don't know. But after suppression of air defense, isolation of the objective area, finally, we move in and arrest the individual that we're looking for.
Colonel Warren, I want to get a better understanding of this. Obviously, it would require some troops to touch the ground to be able to pick up Nicolas Maduro in the first place here. Obviously, 15,000 troops is not enough to secure a country like that. The president has made no indication the ground troops will be going into Venezuela in any meaningful way right now. But what sort of a challenge does this pose for the United States? This ultimately becomes less a military one, but more a diplomatic one to try to allow that country to take the preferred fork in the road, not to return to a sort of authoritarian type regime or leader, but to focus on a more democratic led government right now. Ultimately, these are the early steps that you watch militarily, and then there are other real challenges that begin.
Some would say that these steps that we've done up until now, frankly, are the easy steps, right? We have exceptional special operators, exceptional law enforcement operators who understand how to do these types of missions, but they happen at the speed of violence very, very quickly. A lot of planning obviously went into it, but the execution happens very, very quickly. Now comes what in some people's opinions would be the very, very hard part. And we've seen this before. We saw this in Afghanistan beginning in, after 9/11. We saw this in Iraq. When a regime is toppled, when a regime changes suddenly, there's a vacuum. Now there's a little bit of a vacuum. Who's in charge? Who's running the country? We don't know this. Neither does anyone in Venezuela, it would appear, know this. So there are, of course, as in any country, there are opposing forces. There are different forces who want to be in power. Where is the military internally going to fall on this? Where are the other power centers in Venezuela going to fall on this? Where are the other legitimate and somewhat powerful drug cartels who are operating in that country, as we've talked about, as the president has talked about? Those cartels are still they're still functioning. We've struck some of their boats, but that's about it. So these cartels are still there. They're still strong. They're still functioning. The military, we have not, unlike what we did in Afghanistan or what we did in Iraq, we have not, frankly, inflicted any significant damage on the Venezuelan military. So what are they going to do now is certainly a question, I think, on everyone's mind.
Colonel Steve Warren is an NBC News military analyst. Colonel Warren, we appreciate your expertise in helping us better understand the situation that's still evolving on the ground there in Caracas, Venezuela. As again, hopefully we can put up another picture to show our viewers the situation there. It's a new day, a new dawn in many ways, and it's one that begins without the longtime president of that country, the authoritarian leader Nicolas Maduro, who's now been captured and taken out of the country alongside his wife, according to the president, by U.S. forces. I want to get to our chief foreign correspondent again, Richard Engel, who's been watching this news developing right now. Richard, among the questions that the president will surely be asked at a news conference to take place about 5 hours from now at Mar-a-Lago is whether he had any conversations with Maduro in recent days. Maduro told a Spanish journalist only a couple of days ago that he was open to, in effect, discussions, conversations, perhaps even negotiations with the United States. We wait for those answers. We wait to learn where Maduro is right now. But it also raises real questions about what happens next in that country and what it does in terms of the president's desire to sort of crack down on that narco-terrorist state with so much of the regime still, as evidenced by the public statements coming out of the country, remaining in effect, whether in power, certainly in its positions, though it's unclear who really is in power there.
This is a regime change operation. The government has been decapitated. There clearly was a degree of coordination, unclear with Maduro himself. Not full coordination with Maduro himself. If he wanted to, he could have fled the country. He could have gone to a friendly country. He has some good personal relations with the president of Turkey. He has decent relations with Russia. He's had good relations with Cuba or even Colombia. There are places where if he had wanted to go, he could have gone. So this clearly wasn't a surrender. This was a capture. And as we talked about earlier, this helicopter extraction was supported by a military operation, whether it was Tomahawks or airstrikes or a combination of both. There was suppressive fire used to protect U.S. personnel during this extraction operation. Now, as you talked earlier about
come on.
World, perhaps only the United States has this kind of capability. But now, who is going to run the country? Was this President Trump's perhaps greatest military accomplishment? In a bloodless regime change operation against an illegitimate dictator who ran a mafia state? If there's a successful, quick democratic transition and the legitimate opposition, which won the last elections, which were then stolen from them, if they are able to come into power, work out a working relationship with the existing Venezuelan military, then this will be a great success. If, however, the military divides, a new strong man who is potentially anti-United States emerges in power, the country descends into civil war, then this will be perhaps President Trump's greatest failure. He clearly is hoping for the latter, and I know a lot of back-channel negotiations have been involved in this. I've been talking to some of the negotiators who were working with Trump administration officials. And there are many Trump administration officials who have interests here. President Trump's interest, as he's made clear, was always the drugs, to stop the drug trade, and he's interested in Venezuela's oil. He's made that clear. Venezuela has enormous oil
and
reserves.
A lot of other natural resources for everything from auto parts to cell phones to nuclear fuel.
And he was critical when the United States went into Iraq that the United States didn't take the oil. Marco Rubio himself, coming up in Latin American politics, anti-Cuban platform, has an interest in regime change in Venezuela, which he hopes will then weaken an alliance of states that are anti-American in Latin America, including Cuba and Venezuela being the largest. You mentioned Miller, who has an immigration agenda, would want fewer migrants coming out of Venezuela, potentially Venezuela becoming a place where migrants can go. So this is a new day. About it, how successful it was, but this is a new day for the U.S. relations in Latin America, with President Trump asserting dominance and doing a snatch and grab operation. Will this encourage other leaders around the world to do the same with their enemies, and will it make the United States, which in theory defends democracy and human rights, seem hypocritical?
You've been listening to Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent. Richard, you were talking with me about the oil reserves in Venezuela. Their reserves, number one, the largest in the world, believed to be roughly 300 billion barrels by some assessments, accounting for approaching 20% of the global supply there in Venezuela. You'll remember after the U.S. recently seized one of the sanctioned oil tankers, as the White House described it, the president said that it was his belief that the U.S. would then seize that oil, would keep that oil. That tanker was then routed to the United States, specifically to Texas. Keir Simmons is our chief international correspondent. He's been watching this developing news with us as well. And Keir, quickly to you, I want to share a statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry. Vladimir Putin's the Kremlin now reacting to this, saying that the United States committed, in its words, an act of armed aggression against Venezuela that it said was both deeply concerning and condemnable. That is notable because while on the one hand the U.S. has been focused heavily in this region on Venezuela, the president and his team simultaneously have been focused on trying to bring about an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine. Vladimir Putin, for a variety of reasons over the course of many months, has been disinclined, it appears, to resolve the situation there. We have heard from Volodymyr Zelensky, who has also been very reluctant to give up land in that country. But this does infuse a new wrinkle into another global hotspot, which is Russia as well.
Yeah, I've been reading that statement too, Peter, and I've been reflecting that this is why Richard Engel describes this as such a significant moment, is that what you have overnight is the U.S. striking a Russian partner. Maduro was, a de facto ally of President Putin, and President Trump has just taken him out. So you have that aspect. And on the other hand, you have President Putin now offering his diplomacy, if you like, to try to stabilize the situation. Effectively, you have President Putin saying, okay, we have a problem in your region, Mr. Trump. Let me help you to solve that. Sounds familiar, and it is therefore significant because it gives the Russians the ability to kind of say, well, look, you
had a
see, this
choice. He
happens
could have
everywhere,
cooperated or the
and we
other
help
way.
each other to solve it.
I mean, that's just
So
the reality
you
of
can
the
see
situation.
how there are multiple dimensions to this, and the implications and the impact of it we will only know in the months ahead. But there's another aspect to this too, Peter, and I think it's really fascinating, and people will be talking about this again as we look ahead, is that what you have here is very familiar, which is the U.S. intervening in another country to potentially bring about, you might even say, and the Trump administration isn't saying this clearly, and there's a reason why perhaps they're not quite saying it this way, but maybe even to try and bring about democracy, but certainly intervening. And that is something that we have seen before from the U.S., and Richard has been very carefully navigating those questions over whether it really works, and there is plenty of history to suggest that it does not, and then there are some examples of moments when it has made a difference. And all of this is happening while there are protests in Iran, effectively looking to overthrow the regime there, and those protests are the most significant since some years ago, the uprising over the killing of of a young woman in Iran. So there, too, there is a threat to that regime. And, of course, Iran is a close partner to Venezuela. So this is, there are moving parts here, and there is no doubt of the significance.
So you're right, Kieran. The president's victory speech upon winning the last election, he said, "I'm not going to start wars. I'm going to stop wars." We're now hearing some of the criticism coming in from some of the president's political opponents. Among them, we're hearing from one of the top national security officials who served beneath President Obama during his time in office. That's Ben Rhodes, who says, in simple terms, he says, a regime change war in Latin America based on absurd rationales about drug trafficking, no explanation of goals, and counter to everything Trump promised, campaigning, and we're not even a full year into Trump's term. You can see what the domestic criticism will be of the actions taking place. Richard Engel, quickly to you, there are still, even as we watch what appears to be a successful capture operation, there is still a lot of potential complications in the days, hours, days, and weeks ahead.
Huge complications. Doing a successful military extraction, like a successful counterterrorism strike, is something that President Trump will talk about. He will praise the bravery of the soldiers. He will talk about how it was carried out with great expertise and precision and coordination, and it seems that it was. But who will govern the country? How will it run? Will the people accept it? All very open questions. And I wanted to go back for a second to ask Keir a question, if I may, because we heard that statement. I heard it live on this conversation from the Kremlin. And one thing that struck me is it didn't seem to be that strong. I've heard the Kremlin, when it wants to condemn them, use much stronger terms. This described it as it's condemnable. It wasn't very, I don't want to say emphatic. Do you think in a way that this kind of operation, a regime change operation, which is what the President Trump just did, could even help Vladimir Putin, could help him justify the war in Ukraine? It could help him reestablish what used to be called the sphere of influence world during the Cold War, where the United States controls its neighborhood and Russia dominated its pace. Could this actually help Putin? Is he secretly...
Yeah, Richard, yeah, I think you ask a great question. And I think that, again, it's multi-layered. So on the one hand, yes, you can see in that statement from the Kremlin, from President Putin, that he is trying to position himself to be the diplomat, that he is, it's not in many ways a full condemnation, although it does, as you say, use the word condemnable. There is that aspect. And on the other hand, Richard, this is in Venezuela, this is a partner of Russia, a close ally, if you like. And you've seen in the years since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, President Putin lose partners, and not least, of course, and you were there to see it, Richard, President Assad of Syria falling. So historians may look back on this and see it as the slow weakening of Russia's power, despite the connection between President Trump and President Putin, the personal connection. This may be seen in the future as another brick in the wall, if you like, for Russia's global capability and global standing. But clearly, President Putin is battling to overcome that view, and Putin will know, and let's just say that Putin has been in power for long enough to have been around for the invasion of Iraq and to have said that that should not happen, the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Putin will know that this is now unpredictable. And he is the master of tactics, and he will be waiting for the opportunity to take advantage of whatever takes place in the coming months.
Because as you mentioned, he might be trying to make lemonade out of lemons. He didn't issue a very strong condemnation, but as you say, he's lost an ally in Nicolas Maduro. He has lost Syria entirely, which was a very important military outpost for Russia. He is continuing to fight a war in Ukraine. Yes, he's making some battlefield grounds, but he is also losing an enormous amount of men and resources in this war, and he's become more and more dependent on China and the Iranian regime, which you mentioned is facing its biggest challenge in the last several years with protests that have just turned deadly.
Notification bell,
and
guys.
Iran provides a lot of the weaponry, particularly a lot of the
We're going
drone
to be covering
technology
the news
to Russia.
conference
So
this
he's
morning.
not in as strong a position as he tends to project, and he has now just lost another ally. But it struck me that his condemnation seemed a bit half-hearted, but perhaps that is the best he can deal with at the moment, considering the hand of cards that he's holding.
Yeah, I think that's right, Richard. And I think too, and we've discussed this in the hours now that have played out since this strike took place. There's another piece to this too, isn't there? And that is about the idea that powers around the world have the power to intervene in their regions, in what Russia would describe as its near abroad. And I think that we can't have this conversation without just indicating an interest in what might be being thought about in Beijing by President Xi and what his ambitions for his region, the frankly part of the world that in this century it will be the most important part of the world. How will he view actions like this by the United States and what it will mean for him and one other player around the world with ambitions that are not in America's interest, Kim Jong-un of North Korea. How will he be seeing this and what will he think this means for him? And again, this is a multi-layered, because you can imagine that in Pyongyang, in North Korea, they may be saying, let's be careful, because the United States isn't messing around. But alternatively, they may also be saying, well, you're allowed to intervene in places next door to you because that's what America's doing, Peter.
Keir Simmons, our chief international correspondent, Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent. Gentlemen, stay with us right now. Again, I'm Peter Alexander, just after 6 o'clock on the East Coast, shortly after 7 a.m. in Venezuela. Those are pictures from earlier this morning. Before dawn, giant explosions, fiery explosions taking place in and around the capital city there. You can see the fire raining down on that city. The president a short time ago announcing that the United States...
We have Trump saying Maduro's been captured and flown out of Venezuela after U.S. airstrikes on Caracas, while Venezuelan officials are insisting they're still in control and calling this an illegal attack until we see hard confirmation in multiple sources. The story is still developing right now in real time.
As in his words, successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, adding that Maduro has been, along with his wife, in the president's words, captured and flown out of the country. The president saying the operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. He says there are more details to come, saying there will be a news conference that he will address the country.
Right here, I will be tracking every news statement out of Mar-a-Lago, the Pentagon, and Caracas. And when something big breaks, we will go live again. We will have that news conference right here on the Zero Dark Tony Show this morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, turn on all notifications, hit that like button, and drop a comment with what you think. Is this the end of Maduro's rule or the start of something much darker? So smash the like button on your way out so this stream keeps pushing out into the algorithm. We have eclipsed over 100,000 views on this live stream, so I want to thank everybody for helping me out with that. The truth is a moving target, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for the gifted memberships. Thank you, mods. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I want to sincerely thank you, and I hope we see you later on this morning for the news conference from Mar-a-Lago. And I will see you on the next one. Thank you. Good night.